views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Blue Ridge PBS, the Virginia Department of Education, or the Virginia Society for Technology and Education.
On this edition of ActiVAtED Learning, we travel to Goochland County, Virginia, where a small school division has been implementing the use of virtual reality to give students access to experiences they might not otherwise be able to. Matt Caratachea is the Director of Instructional Innovation, and he and his team are doing just that. He joined me to talk about the benefits and challenges of using VR in the classroom.
Blue Ridge PBS, in partnership with the Virginia Department of Education and in collaboration with VISTI, the Virginia Society for Technology and Education, is talking to leading educators about what gets them energized and how technology is being used to inspire student engagement. This is ActiVAtED Learning.
Sometimes when you think VR, when you see people with the headset on, you think it's like really solitary and you're like, oh, it kind of cuts me off from human interaction. But it was doing the opposite, which was really interesting and great. We had a student in a wheelchair who always wanted to go fishing. And so we had a fishing app and, he didn't have to wheel out into the rocks and sand and all that. He could do it right from school.
Matt Caratachea, welcome to ActiVAtED Learning. I'm so glad you're here. You and I have corresponded a couple times, but we haven't actually met. Tell me what you do here in Goochland County.
So I'm the Director of Instructional Innovation. I support our instructional technology coaches and our instructional technology program, our school librarians, their program, and computer science, all the fun stuff.
You get to touch a lot of different cool people's lives, don't you?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So always we start with just the background question, how did you get into instructional technology? What was your path as an educator?
So I accidentally started teaching preschool and
accidentally. Tell me, let's stop you there.
So I took a class in college where we had to do some field work. It was a child psychology class. And so there was a preschool right down the street from me. And I was like, well, I'll do it there because I can walk. And so I started working there for class. And then they offered me a job to be a sub and then turned into an actual job. And I was like, oh, this is pretty fun. I like working with kids. I'd never thought about working with kids before that. And it was the VCU Child Development Center. And so working there, I got to go to school for free. And so I was like, well, I'll go back to school, get my master's in education, and I'll teach elementary school. So I thought I was going to be a kindergarten teacher. I ended up teaching third grade and did that for a while. Loved it. And then I started working with our instructional technology coach. She was an ITRT. Now in that school division, they call them innovative learning coaches. It's like the alphabet.
That's a much better name, I think. I like innovative learning.
I like it too. And so she was talking to me and she was like, have you ever thought about doing this where you get to work with teachers and technology and help, students and teachers learn? And I was like, no, I thought, I really like being a third grade teacher. She was like, okay, well, I think you should apply for a position. It's open. You're probably not going to get it. Don't worry. So then I got the job, which was great. And then I did that for a little while. And that was in another school division. And now I'm in Goochland as the Director of Instructional Innovation.
Fantastic. And I also always like to ask, was in your educational experience, K-12, we'll limit it to K-12, was there a teacher who, I know you didn't know you were going to be a teacher, but when you became a teacher, somebody that you look back to think, now, how did he or she do it?
I've got a real answer and then an answer that I gave when I was in college. Sure. So I'll give you both. So the real answer is my second grade teacher. When I first started getting into like what do teachers actually do, and it's not just getting in the classroom and doing whatever you want. There's an art and there's things that you're supposed to be doing in the classroom to help students learn. She made learning super engaging and fun and real world. We were outside a lot. She did classroom transformations before. I'm sure that was branded. I mean, this was a while ago. She made it really fun and engaging, and I learned so much. And she was very impressed that I could spell my last name, which was great. Because it's you said it beautifully too.
Well, I practiced it last year because you did record some of the theme music we used for the podcast last year, and I had to pronounce it for the credits. So
you did a great job.
Caratachea. Yeah, it's not that easy.
Yeah. So she's my real answer. And it's so funny. My parents still run into her around town, and she asks how I'm doing, and it makes me feel good. But the funny answer that I always gave when I was in college was Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop, when he's like carrying the kids out screaming when the fire alarm goes off, and there's like it's just crazy. I just thought it was hilarious. So
Arnold Schwarzenegger is at least it was that movie as your role model and not Terminator or something else. Yeah. So we're here today because Goochland has been recognized as a real leader in virtual reality in K-12. And I think for many of our teachers and educators who listen to this podcast, virtual reality sounds cool, but they haven't yet figured out how to use it in the classroom. This is also a good time for me just to introduce, because I think we may come up with some buzzwords in this discussion. This is our buzzword bell. So if I ring it, it's not because I don't like you. It's because I feel like our listeners might need a little explanation on an acronym or something else. So so that's what that is. If anybody hears it, maybe we'll get through this interview without it. So virtual reality, let's first just kind of define it so that we know what it is and what it isn't in a classroom.
okay, so well, before we do that, I always thought that the bell was fake. I thought that you did that in post because it just sounds so perfect.
Yeah, well, it is a beautiful bell. I actually had to get 2 of them because the first one I got just didn't have the tone I was looking for. So no, we try to do it live. Sometimes I forget to bring it, and then we do edit it.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
It's a little inside baseball for those of you who are audio nerds like me. So again, virtual reality, what is it in a classroom and what is it in general? Like there's people who still have never put on the glasses or done any of that stuff.
So virtual reality is right now, it's basically you put a headset on and there's different forms of it. You can have controllers so that you can actually control yourself, move around. There's some where you just have the headset and it's more of like just an immersive experience. Great for field trips and all that for inside school. But yeah, you're completely immersed. You look around and you're in this virtual world, and it's easy to get lost in the virtual world. It's funny because when all this first started coming out, it kind of looked like Nintendo 64 a little bit. Now I feel like it looks like somebody's going to get mad at me. I feel like it looks like PlayStation 3. So it's come a long way. It's still not like I put it on and I'm like, whoa, Tom's here. This is amazing. But it's pretty close.
It's still not quite reality,
Not
but it is
quite.
virtual reality.
Yeah. And so you can interact with virtual things. It's great for things that are like maybe unsafe to do in real life. And so you can practice, surgery or something like that. And you could skydive or something if you're a little afraid of that, a little safer in virtual reality.
Right. Sure. And also things that can be very expensive to do. Yes. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit. When did you first come across, when was the first pair of virtual reality, first headset you put on or first time you were exposed to it? And what did that leave you thinking?
Do you remember in the 90s, like at shopping malls when they had the demos? Did you have demos around?
I remember seeing them, but I never did it.
I think I did it once and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. But I never really did it after that. And so one of my friends, he's a VR developer. He works for the military. He was just a VR enthusiast. And so he kind of was like, oh, I gotta show you this. I'm going to come over. I'm going to bring my computer. He had to bring his computer, his monitor, like this whole room set.
Probably a pretty beefy computer.
Very beefy. Yeah. Like it was a huge, expensive setup. And he was working on an app, but we were playing some other apps. And I was like, this is really cool. I could see kids getting a kick out of this. But where I kind of approached technology, I came from I was really into like the maker movement stuff. So using technology to make physical or digital things to show, learning, or just to show like, oh, I had these skills to make this thing. So the whole time when I was using it, I was like, I wonder if you could use VR in a way to make something.
So we've touched on this quite a bit, but the educational environment is obviously different than the entertainment environment. So what have you seen kids learning that would have been much harder to teach or taken longer or not been as effective if they had done a more traditional, learning experience?
Yeah, so we have dabbled in a bunch of things. We've seen where, oh, this was great. It really, really amplified everything, did exactly what you said. And then we've done things where like, man, that was a headache. And I think it was just easier to do it the old way, which I think is part of this, like figuring out where it fits. But we've done things from fourth grade SOLs where outer space, it's like learning about the planets, learning about space. And that would be, very expensive to go to. Very dangerous.
A little dangerous, yeah.
So that's been really successful. And it was great because our teacher, who's now an instructional technology coach, Christian Mock, he was fourth grade teacher. He brought a bunch of parents in. It was for this event that they had at school. So I walked into his classroom and there were parents and students in VR. They were cracking up. They were like, oh, I got to show you this. I got to show you this. Everybody was just engaged. And it wasn't sometimes when you think VR, when you see people with the headset on, you think it's like really solitary and you're like, oh, it kind of cuts me off from human interaction. But it was doing the opposite, which was really interesting and great. So that was one.
Right, because you can put a large number of people into the same environment. Right?
Yeah, so we haven't done that yet. We've done a little bit of that in a different app, but it's the way that VR, the way that we have it set up, we haven't found the best way to do that yet. I've talked a little bit with Logan from Bristol. He has a VR.
By the way, I'll just say, interview with Logan Childress on the first season of ActiVATED Learning. You can find that wherever you found this one.
That wasn't even planned. That was amazing.
Nice job. Thanks for setting me up there.
Oh yeah, he's great, and they've approached it a little differently than us, and I've learned a lot from him. We still need to make the trip out there, but I think he's done more of that than we have. But it's really interesting because I feel like people really want to share their experiences. And when you're in VR, there are ways to do it, but people immediately start just talking to you. They know that you're next to them. Like, oh my gosh, okay, I see this, I'm doing this. I need to experience this with you. Here, put this on. And it was great to see students and parents doing that together. So some other things that we've done with students that may have been a little bit more challenging or not possible without VR. One of the things is we have a really robust CTE department, and we're super small, but our CTE department is just like booming. It's amazing. But you've been to Goochland, you've driven around. We don't really have many skyscrapers here. We don't have any. So we're a small town, and our students don't have the experiences that like operating a tower crane. We just can't do it because we don't have towers around here. So there is a VR app where you can get into a crane and you can start doing construction on like big high rises. And our students really love that. And I showed a couple of our members of our Goochland Education Foundation who have been huge supporters of us in this space, in all spaces, but especially VR. I was demoing that app for them and just making a fool of myself, just destroying buildings, and everybody was laughing at me, and realized I need to go probably to some class.
Practice a little bit, yeah. Well, and I think it's important, we are in Goochland County, and for people who don't know Goochland, we're not far from Richmond, but we're not in Richmond. Mm-hmm. And you were telling me the number of students in the whole division is how many?
Yeah, so I think this year is our biggest year since I've been here, and I've been here for 5 years, and we've got around 2,700 kids.
So, there are many, there are probably some, high schools in the state that are as big as your division. And I think it's just important that viewers know that, this isn't something that has to be done in Norfolk, in a Richmond, in a big school division, in a Fairfax, or and in many ways, probably because you're smaller and you've got that direct connection to teachers, you're able to partner with them. And if something doesn't work, it doesn't work with a few kids, and then you can take it back and see.
This is ActiVATED Learning.
We think that our students and our children right now know how to navigate technology because it's everywhere.
Because we see them in Walmart in the grocery cart, with their iPad.
We have the iPad kids, but when you want them to use them for a certain purpose, it has to be taught. And so it all came down to teaching our students how to use those tools in a meaningful way.
Subscribe to the podcast on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Blue Ridge PBS Echo TV.
How difficult, what's the learning curve for VR? If a teacher is contemplating asking for it, or if a technology staff is like, we need to make an investment in a traveling VR set or something that's going to go around the division, do you need a bunch of money to do this?
No, you don't need a bunch of money. You do need maybe in the beginning some investments in ad bill or something like that, because it can get a little bit taxing. But I feel like we figured out a bunch, and we've worked with other school divisions, 3 or 4 in the area, and then a few virtually, to help educate them on things that we found that we were like, oh my gosh, if we would have just known this, it would have made our lives so much easier. But one headset costs $300, and then the apps are relatively cheap. I think the most expensive app that we've purchased was like $20. And so money isn't a big factor. You have to have, I think, buy-in with your instructional technology and operational technology departments, because you have to connect these to the internet, which in some places can be really difficult. It's like moving a mountain. And I understand, because, safety is number one. But then once you get them on, you have to have some workflows on how to purchase apps. And then once you have all that, we learned when we first started, we didn't have a management system for them. So it's basically like if you bought a Meta Quest off the shelf and put it on, you see the app store and all that. And there's some things that you don't really want kids to see, not inappropriate. It's just maybe it's like a scary game or something, and you're working with
right. We always have to be concerned. What are we putting in front of kids?
Exactly. So we reached out to a bunch of companies, and we were like, we want to make sure we have more control over the experience that the students are having. And so we partnered with a company called Arbor XR, and every school division we meet with, we're like, they're amazing. Work with them. They don't have it anymore, but the reason we worked with them is because the first 50 devices for schools was free to manage, and we had less than 50. So we were like, oh, we're in. This is great. No overhead. But now it's very cheap, but it's not free for that. But it's great because then you can limit the apps. If you only want the kids to see one app, but you've purchased 20, you can only push that one app, and they can only view that app. And it's great to just make sure kids are doing the right thing.
Helps with the manager, make sure they're exploring outer space and not
exactly,
doing something else that may be also very fun, but doesn't fit with the standards that they're trying to learn at the moment. And it sounds like a great kind of virtual community where you're able to reach out to folks in Bristol, which is a long way from here, probably 5 hours away from here, but also, it's no longer bleeding edge, even cutting edge stuff. This is getting used more and more in divisions. I would guess that most of the divisions in our state probably have at least somebody playing with it a little bit.
Yes. I'd hope so.
So in terms of troubleshooting, how much does a teacher need to know? How much, do they need you to be there when they're using it?
So no, not me.
Or someone,
it is helpful,
somebody from the staff.
Somebody
team up with your ITRT or whatever that position is called in your division.
Yeah, it's helpful only because there are some teachers who are good to go. They can roll with it. But it's helpful to just have somebody where if like an account gets disconnected, they can hop online real quick, reconnect it. It only takes a second, but something like that could be a stumbling block. I always put myself back into my classroom teacher shoes, and I'm like, okay, well, if I had 3 kids that were getting disconnected, and I've got a class of 20 kids, and they're all very, very lovely kids, but very needy, would I continue to use this, or would I stop? And then so my team, they always make sure to collaborate, even if the teacher's like, nope, I'm good, I've got it. We've got either an ITC or a librarian who's going to be there with them just to make sure that everything goes super smooth.
A wingman, right?
Wingman, yeah, I love that.
So I think most of us think of VR as, oh yeah, I can have this amazing virtual experience. I can take my kids to the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
I can, take them to outer space.
Mm-hmm.
your interest is in modeling, I know, and you've done a lot of that. How does it go? How do you take it from the passive use of VR, where it is something more active, where the students are building something either physical or electronic?
Yeah, so and this kind of goes back to what I was saying, like how I got into VR. When I was an elementary school teacher and coach, I would work with kids, and we would use Tinkercad to do some 3D modeling, and they would 3D print, and it was great, except for they had to use a trackpad and their keyboard, and I was like, I wish they could just use their hands. And the app that got me really into this, and it was the first app that we tried here with a group of high school science teachers who were amazing, and they still are amazing, is called Gravity Sketch. And it's basically, it puts you into a virtual room, and you've got 3D tools that you can use, shapes, but you can also just draw like freehand, and you can make some really incredible things. We had an art teacher. She was doing kind of like a product design class at our middle school, and they used Gravity Sketch to design I think it was shoes. I think they were designing shoes, which was amazing. And I haven't done it, but I would love to. I was actually talking to a CTE teacher this morning about it. You can take those designs and you can download them and 3D print them. Things will get a little wonky because, I mean, you kind of have unlimited ability to do whatever you want in there. So how much of that can be 3D printed? We'd have to really think about that going in, but it's possible.
And is this requiring, because I've not played.
We should put you in one.
You should have, but maybe next time.
Next time.
When it comes to things, I know Logan showed me there were some kind of sensor type things that people can wear, or that can enhance the experience so that you actually can, grab something or whatever. Is that something that do you have any of that? And is that something? Tell me about that.
So yeah, he does really cool stuff. I need to get there. We don't have anything like that. We do have like you can use your hands for certain apps and just only your hands to manipulate things, but you don't really get like that tactile feedback. Most of the apps that we use are just the two controllers. They're like video games.
So it is a controller in your hand, though, so you can propel yourself forward or whatever with those. And again, one of the reasons I wanted to come to you is that you guys aren't on that bleeding edge. You're applying it with the resources that a small school division has. So I think that's important. What's been your experience with kids with special needs or who have disabilities that sometimes can be a real barrier to technology use?
We've used VR with a couple of different groups at our high school and middle school, and it's been great to give them. We had a student in a wheelchair who always wanted to go fishing, and so we had a fishing app, and he didn't have to wheel out into the rocks and sand and all that. He could do it right from school. Gives him just another experience. And we've also just met this week with another company who focuses on students with disabilities and how to teach certain life skills, things from like crossing the road to having a conversation with peers. And we're looking into that. It looks really promising. It looks really fun and engaging. And I already have a couple of teachers in mind. It's also helpful being in a small school division because when I have these meetings, I'm like, oh yeah, Miss Parker at the high school, she's going to be the perfect person for this. So,
or even down to a student. I have a student who wants to learn to fish, right?
Exactly.
And it's a little easier to know. You talked about the vocational CTE application of that crane operation, which sounds really fun. And I know a good crane operator can probably make a very, very, very good living, even if they can't do it here in Goochland where there's no call for it. But any other sort of CTE vocational experiences that kids are having that you think, again, the difficulty of the money it takes to run a really good, robust CTE program. Is there an application have you been using VR in that way as well?
Yeah. One other area that we've been looking into is welding. We have a welding class and we've got materials at the high school, but at the middle school, we don't really have the access to that because they're two separate buildings because it's at our Career and Technical Center. That's not what it's called. Career and Workforce Development Center. We just renamed it the other year. And we were trying to figure out, the CTE director and I were trying to figure out how do we give students at the middle school experience with welding instead of just busing them over to the Career Workforce Development Center. How do we give them that experience in the middle school? And this was a way that was very affordable. The price tag looked a little steep to me, but he was like, oh no, this is nothing compared to actual
welding and the materials. That's the thing about a lot of these CTE courses is, you teach somebody how to change a tire, you have to have tires. And so, yeah, sometimes when we think of, oh, this is a lot of money, but compared to what I would spend to put a welding station into the middle school. And also, I imagine the high school teachers, if they're not the same people, would be overjoyed when these kids matriculate up there. Yes. And, oh, I already understand. I've already had the safety module probably. I already understand what I can and can't do and, all of those things. So that's great. Because not everything is, rainbows and unicorns. What are some of the biggest hurdles to getting teachers to adopt it and to, think outside? Like if you were at another division, what might be some hurdles that somebody should be prepared for if you wanted to go after VR in a more robust way in your own division?
Yeah, I think if you are in a school-based, and you're the champion of it, there are huge pros and cons. So if you're school-based, the people, you're like, oh, I know these teachers that will be so into this, and I really want to try it with them. But then sometimes there's layers and layers and layers of red tape where doing something like this might seem scary to somebody making the purchasing decisions. So collaborating with other school divisions would be a great thing to do. I do think we're not there yet. When I used to work with a great former librarian, Calypso Gilstrap in Goochland, she kind of compared it to using when Kindles first came out in school use, and it kind of felt like the Wild West. Like there wasn't a good program for ebooks yet, and now it's very easy to get ebooks. I can go into our system, I can purchase them, I can push them to certain kids, I can make them available to certain grade levels. It's great, but VR right now isn't quite there yet. Even with tools like ArborXR, and there's other companies that do that, it's not quite there yet. So kind of got to figure out the workarounds. I feel like teachers are the best at that because they're like, I can take anything and make it educational. That's the biggest thing right now.
Sure. So, it's like anything else this isn't brand new, but it's still pretty new. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have kids who have not used this technology yet, probably a few who have because they're gaming or whatever with them. But it sounds like if you're somebody who's not afraid to push a few buttons, that's always the thing, is getting over the fear of buttons.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
It's doable.
Yep. VR in the commercial world is just a very individual type thing. And there are some things where you can like meet with people and all of that, but it's really like my experience. But in education, it's more of a shared experience. So it's great to see things slowly move that way. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the next year, 2, 3, because it's come so far since we started and so much easier to implement. We've learned a lot, and I'm just excited to see what comes next and how students can. We have a class in CTE where students develop VR apps, and we want to make like an incubator. I'd love to see that take off, where teachers are like, I need this experience for my students. Can you guys make this for me? Students make it and then deliver it to the teacher. They're the customer. And then we have like an internal app development process going. I would love to see where that goes. There's just so many.
I love that idea. And I love the idea that, maybe it could be shared, much like open educational resources are shared everywhere through GoUp and other things. Well, I now have a whole new list of things to look for when I walk around the vendor area at this year's VISTI conference and people are pushing VR. I'm going to have a better vocabulary. I thank you for that. We did not have to ring the buzzword bell because you kept things to my level, which I really appreciate.
That was my goal the whole time, actually.
There, to avoid the buzzword bell. And I just want to thank you for letting me come in and on this beautiful day and spend some time in your office. And Just want to encourage everybody, if you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, please do. ActiVATED Learning, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts, and you can go to the website of Blue Ridge PBS. We also have all the links and QR codes and things for you to subscribe. It really does help us when you subscribe, and it also will alert you when there's a new episode. So we thank you very much for doing that. Matt Caratachea, thanks so much for taking the time with me today.
Thank you.
All right, and for ActiVATED Learning, I'm Tom Landon.
ActiVATED Learning is produced by Blue Ridge PBS in partnership with the Virginia Department of Education
and in collaboration with VISTI, the Virginia Society for Technology and Education.
This podcast is hosted and produced by Tom Landon, Director of Educational Innovation,
with lots of help from graphic and audio designer Jay Prater.
Additional support provided by Andy Depew in our podcast studio.
Our Vice President of Education is Dr. Rose Martin.
Special thanks to Calypso Gilstrap, Associate Director of the Office of Educational Technology and Classroom Innovation
at the Virginia Department of Education.
Our credits are read by students at Westside and Highland Park Elementary Schools in Roanoke, Virginia. If you like what you hear, subscribe to ActiVATED Learning wherever you get your podcasts.
Or watch the Echo channel at blueridgepbs.org.